Welcome to Chelsea's Vocation. Chelsea raised 2 children on the autism spectrum, Justus and Noey, into adulthood. They're the reason why she can't help but smile when she recognizes autism in another human, especially a child. Chelsea spent almost 2 decades studying this neurotype as a parent professional, learning how to better adapt her own behavior and the environment around autistic children to both encourage and foster their development. She hopes through this podcast that you might better understand how neurotypical people process your neurology if you're autistic, or how to better yourself as someone who values autistic humans and your relationship with them. Chelsea is a lifelong learner and expects you are too, so don't hesitate to reach out to her through social media comments or the contact form on our website with your own insights. If you're coming to this podcast after the first 5 episodes, you may want to go to the show and review 1 or more of those foundational episodes to know where she's coming from. Either way, we're glad you're here now.
One of my favorite things about the autistic neurotype is autistic joy. I love it, especially when this vibrant joy is fueled by fascinations or passions. This intense connection to a topic was subjugated to clinical language, which is where the term perseveration originated. So while I find autistic people have what I and others have referred to as special interests, it's not just a collection or appreciation as you might find in the neuromajority, but an autistic person's special interest is often much richer, encompassing a comprehensive understanding that unabashedly inspires an entire way of being. My experience has been that sharing these passions is meant to evoke a similar love in another person, which is as rare as the depth of fascination itself. My now grown autistic children have enjoyed many special interests over the years. Some have been fleeting and others enduring. I remember seeing these special interests managed differently across environments while my kids were grade school aged, especially for some autistic students whose special interests are more unconventional. I heard of an IEP goal to fade the need to hang onto a flag because it made him stand out, God forbid. When Justus was in middle school, I heard about Mark and Margaret Fairbanks launching Islands of Brilliance. They were doing something that reminded me of Temple Grandin's approach to channeling autistic passions. Channel them into employable skills. It's not to say that a person's worth is connected to their production, but to acknowledge that their passion isn't perseveration or obsession. It deserves to be celebrated. It was 9 years ago when Justus first started doing workshops with Islands of Brilliance, and it was clear that he was a quick study of graphic design programs when it meant he could use them to create art connected to his passions. I love the way Islands of Brilliance shortened to and made way cooler the term special interest into SpINs. And I'm grateful Margaret is here to talk about SpINs today. Thank you for joining me, Margaret.
Well, thank you for having me. And I wish we could personally take credit at Islands for coining the term SpIN, which you said special interest. That is from the adult autistic community.
Was it your autistic community at Islands, or where was it?
Quite honestly, we just want to learn and grow, right? So as parents of an autistic young man, we can't make assumptions about who he is or what he does or his choices, right? So I remember when I first started actually studying autism, I was always told to use person first, right? So that the child with autism, but as we continue to be in this world, now we're 13 years into Islands, we realize that we can't be the ones making those choices. We have to listen to, our students, those individuals who actually have the lived experience. So we started asking those questions, and sometimes it wasn't directly. It was like digging into actually autistic, or doing some of these, either webinars or podcasts or just blogs. What does the community want to be described as? And now we're learning it is identity first. So the autistic individual. And that's where got the term SpIN. So you take that special interest and it's a spin because you're spinning it in a positive direction, which I absolutely love.
So even that is multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
Why do we have to simplify things to just a cute abbreviation? Spinning it linguistically to taking it from something clinical or pathological and making it something super relatable.
Well, don't we all have our own SpINs?
Yes.
We do that all the time. And again, sometimes it changes, but sometimes it's the same thing. So why do we, for the neurotypical population, think it's okay if you are adamantly passionate about the Packers? But for our neurodivergent community, it is odd when you're passionate about something that might be considered not age appropriate or kind of outside the norm. But when you find your people and you find your other people who have those same spins, you found your community. And what's more important than that?
That is just 100% it, right? Is finding community. I don't think that there's a passion that I haven't heard about that someone else doesn't have. I want to take you back a little bit to
Okay.
Islands of Brilliance origin story. Tell me a little bit about how you took what you knew as parents and what he knew about himself and made it into this powerhouse nonprofit.
Okay, I'll try to give you the condensed version because I know we have a limited amount of time. But the bottom line is Harry was identified at the age of 3. And at the time, neither Mark or I had any knowledge other than just a vague reference to what autism actually meant, right? So everything was new to us. The good news is we were able to seek early intervention, which was really wonderful. But quite often they would say, model the behavior you want to see, right? If you want him to say hello or make eye contact, model that for him. And he had no interest in that because he was very happy living on the island of Sodor. He loved Thomas the Tank Engine. So I kept trying to, I was an actress at the time, so I was really good at modeling things. I'm like, I can have this conversation back and forth, but he was just like, talk to the hand, Mom. I got Thomas over here. I don't care what you want me to do. But what I did one day is when I need to reach my audience because the script I was using didn't interest him whatsoever. Trains did. So I pretended I was a train. I literally got down on my hands and knees, went, beep, beep, hello, Thomas. And he looked at me. It had been months since we even tried to make eye contact, but we connected just a moment. But that was that moment where I'm like, it can't be what I think is important. It's got to be what he finds value. And I use trains for everything. And even though the teachers at school are like, oh, he won't read. I'm like, well, he'll read a train book. Did you give him a Thomas the Tank Engine book? So that's how we kind of started letting the school know if you made it about trains, he will engage. Typically, they would want to, they call it extinct the behaviors. No, we need to extinct that behavior because he can't be a Thomas the Tank Engine fan at age 8, 9, and 10. But I'm like, how about you use that to engage him and then shape it? So maybe at 9 or 10, instead of talking about Thomas, which we can do privately, we start talking about model trains. So how do you shape that so you protect him from being bullied, but you still feed into that passion? That's how we knew how we could connect with him, right? Make it about trains, especially Thomas. But then as this is happening again, he was identified in 2001, so technology was evolving rapidly at this time. And my husband, Mark, was a creative director at an advertising agency. So he was working on a laptop. Again, very new. This was edgy stuff at the time. He was working in Adobe Illustrator. Harry said, Dad, can I try that? And so when we got home, he gave him maybe 10 minutes of instruction, gave him his laptop. And then 20 minutes later, Harry came back and he created Percy, one of the Thomas the Tank Engine characters, but he'd used tools Mark had not taught him. And Mark was like, okay, we've known about that area of interest. We know if we make it about trains, Harry will engage. But what if we embedded technology too? Because that allowed him to have a voice he didn't have before. It was a creative voice. Because they used to say, oh, he's just, mimicking the things that he likes. Well, he's mimicking them, but he's also telling his own stories. And we could see that through this creativity. So that was the spark of the idea. And I'll give Mark all the credit for the idea. It's like, what if we took that area of interest, which we now call SPIN, but we went there. We didn't try to extinct it. We tried to celebrate it, embrace it, and use that as the starting point. You probably remember the first question we ask families and individuals is, what is your child's passion?
Right.
What is their area of interest? And it's like, what, we can talk about that? Like, we can talk about that. We can celebrate that because that's the starting point. And when you know it's a safe place, when you know you can talk about the Kamen Riders, when you know you can talk about Pokemon, when you know it's safe to talk about this form of anime that, I'll be honest, there's about 20 of them in my brain. I can't keep up. But if that's a safe space and you can go there and celebrate it, and then that is the starting point, you know you're in a place of safety in a community that celebrates who you are.
That really leads me to where I was going next, Margaret. This whole idea of when our boys were growing up, the stuff that we kept hearing from the medical community was extinct this, get rid of that, minimize. You don't want them to stand out. You don't want them to look different from their peers, make them blend. Yeah. And I think that's what I loved most about Islands of Brilliance, because I was becoming increasingly irritated by this idea that I had to make Justus other than who he was.
Mm-hmm.
I could love him for who he was if we just kind of presented that super lovable, relatable side to everyone else, even if they didn't share the same passion.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it make him more endearing instead of trying to make him into other than he was?
Right. And I think that othering, right, is one of the reasons we're called islands of brilliance, because you do feel so isolated. You feel like we're here and there's beauty, there's brilliance here, but you can't see it because you're over there and you're expecting these young autistic individuals to make the leap over there, as opposed to let's go to your happy place. Let's go to the place where you are comfortable.
I remember someone at a conference, and she was referring to her collection of little glass figurines. She loved little glass figurines. She loved the artistry of them. She loved the detail of them. She watched making them be created. She's like, now I'm not autistic, but how is my passion for little glass figurines any different than any autistic passion? And that really helped me to lock in on where Justus was going with it. Now, do I wish that perhaps my husband hadn't sat down our 16-month-old in front of Star Wars before he had any functional language? Maybe. That might have been a regret. But you know what? It's become this lifelong thing, piece of Americana that's culturally relevant and maintains relevance. So Star Wars has worked out. Now, as you referred to Kamen Riders, Justus backed that up into Super Senshai. Is that as universally understood? Maybe not, but Power Rangers is. We can go there and we can find people who love some Power Ranger stuff. So, and Justus has, to your point too, when Harry was making stories up about Thomas and the other trains in that series, Justus was taking Star Wars and putting it together with Kamen Riders. Or taking My Little Pony and putting it together with Power Rangers. And boy, there's a whole universe out there, a whole autistic community. And now it's not strictly autistic, but really, when you look at the way this is breaking out, it's mostly neurodivergent. And they are finding community and connection through those passions.
And that to me is the beauty, the fear, but also the beauty, right? Like as a parent, it's like some of these connections are online. That is an environment that you need to navigate with caution, but also with trust. And I know that sounds like those are dueling ideas, but Harry has found his community through his passion, and it's trains. He now has people through some trial and error, right? There were some stuff. I mean, there were some points where like, okay, this is a safety issue, but he has also learned from that because he's still motivated to find those people, those connecting points, right? So now he has people all across the country, and they travel via train, via bus, to these like train museums and things like that. He's been to Strasburg, Pennsylvania 3 times, once on his own and twice with a group of friends from all over the country. That is passion and technology, but also being smart about it. He figured out who he could trust and who he couldn't, and who his friends were and who they weren't. So that is also parents trusting that our kids are going to figure it out.
And as our kids get older, as they turn into adults too, I've seen some programs where my son's in a situation where the volunteers are teenagers. They are far younger than he is. What does that tell him about his own dignity, about his own adulting, right? That he needs someone just because they're neurotypical, but they're 8 years younger than he is, and they're going to show him some ropes.
I just want to build on that, because what I have found is the hardest part is when you want to be somebody who is supporting, a helper, a mentor, things like that. Quite often it is that person who makes their own choices about what is appropriate or not appropriate or adequate, as opposed to the individual whose project it is, letting them do it to a point where they're happy with it, right? So in other words, in school, it might be, well, this isn't going to get you a good grade, so I'm going to fix it for you because I'm here to be your helper, right? Or, as opposed to like, no, let this project be the authentic person's work, not what you perceive the work should be, because, well, they're identified with a disability. I'm going to have to help them fix it. What does that say to them? It says to that person, they are not capable of doing it themselves.
Justus started with Islands of Brilliance 9 years ago. So he was in his junior year of high school, and he caught on so quickly. I'm like, ooh, we need to figure out a way to get this into his transition plan. Right. Because I think this is where he's headed from a career perspective. I think he could really go on to technical school to do this. So I'm like, look, you guys have to make him college ready so he can leave here with a diploma, so he can go to technical college, so he can study this stuff. But one of the things I noticed in my probably inflexible insistence that happened in his last 2 years of high school was there was a lot of scaffolding in there. And the scaffolding was meant to be helpful to him. But what I realized it did is because that kind of scaffolding was going to fall off when he graduated high school and went into a transition program, he really struggled to be able to do anything authentically on his own.
Yep. I truly think rather than start planning for life after school, sometimes if it's done well, it's done at 14, but most often it's at 18 or later. I think it should start the minute that you're identified, right? So let's start thinking what life is going to look like, because so often, to your point, we're preparing students for a very specific environment, and that's a classroom environment. Why would I want to go back into an environment where I'm always told that I have to fix myself, right? So let's start preparing them for what those, and again, those passions are the driver. Those are the motivator for that environmental stamina and the building of social fluency, right? So that helps you carry the water to these environments. We talk about the technical skills, but really the biggest struggle is that social fluency, right? How do we get to be an environment where we learn how to advocate for ourselves, learn how to say, this is what I need to be successful in whatever way? Maybe it's not verbally, right? How do we identify those points where we can show those capabilities? Our place does not look like a classroom. And we don't want it to for that very reason, because quite often the classroom is the place of struggle, the place of trauma for them, because they're so aware of how other they are.
Another thing I loved about Islands, the process of going through those workshops, very intentionally on your end, taught him so many other skills that he was not otherwise learning. I couldn't believe the first time when they had to start sharing out, and I'm like, oh gosh, Justus is not a sharing out.
Almost every parent says this is not going to go well.
Like, I would love to just download information to you about my passion, but if I have to actually do this in front of an audience and explain this is going to be rough. But one of the things that I love that you do is, how do you want to celebrate? I love this thing, and I would love for you to talk about that. Like, Justus learned to clap for other people, Margaret.
I know, it's so
He
fun.
would close his eyes because he didn't like any of the sensory experience for it, but he recognized that if that's how someone wanted to be celebrated, they celebrated me the way I wanted to be celebrated. I'm going to celebrate them the way they want us to be celebrated. It was remarkable.
Well, thank you, because it's one of those things that it might seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing, right? So when it was hairy and we knew we were going to a place where we're going to practice social skills, there was always resistance, right? Because it's very contextual. Like, I'm in this class to learn how to look somebody in the eye. I'm in this class to learn how to have a reciprocal conversation. There's nothing organic about it. It's very structured, very scripted. Life isn't structured. Life isn't scripted. We help our individuals develop structure, and we build calendar structure, but those organic interactions are never scripted. So how do you set up an environment where you can learn to understand how that happens, right? How you can listen to a question, respond to a question, have other people respond. You're not monologuing. So that's why we start with question of the day. And it's nothing intimidating. It's something silly, but it basically gets people to go, oh, we all get to answer this in a way that makes sense for us. And my answer might be different than yours, or might be the same, but that is sort of that initial icebreaker. It's a level setter, right? But what's amazing is how that kind of spills over, because then you find commonalities with people in the room. Oh, you like chocolate cake? I like chocolate cake. Oh, you chose that costume? I'm going to be that costume too. So all of a sudden you're finding like, I remember that person because I remember their answer and I had a connection to that, right? So that's your starting point. But then you do get that one-to-one, not for all of our workshops, but for the foundation workshops. You've got an elbow buddy, right? And it's usually somebody from the creative field. And that person is not there to teach you everything the same way we are in a classroom. That person is there to explore with you, but try to open doors that you might not have opened before, right? That's the hardest part with our mentors. You keep thinking, well, I have to teach them everything in one workshop. Like, no. Let them be the expert in their area of interest, right? Let them be the expert in their spin. You're the guide in the technology. You are the one saying, oh, you know how we could bring that together? We'll use the lasso tool. Or you know how we could do that? Let me show you this technique, and then you try it. Oh, we need to break it down? Cool, we can break it down step by step. But that is also, again, going back to that motivator, I can learn technical skills because I know what I want this to look like. in my head, I can see it in my head. So I'm willing to listen to you and try these things that might be tricky or harder than I've done before, but I see it happening in front of me. And that's why, everything is visual. Many, many, many of the students that we serve are visual, and they can see it in their head. They want to see it in front of them. So that's the motivator. But then all of a sudden you're seeing it, it's evolving, right? It's taking place, it's happening, and you can tweak it. It may not be perfect. So this share out that you're talking about, for anybody who doesn't know Islands, at the end of every workshop, we do a quick little share out. Where are you at? And this is quite often for our students, especially those who are perfectionists, the hardest piece, right? Because it's not perfect, it's not done. But because it's their area of passion, we're like, oh my gosh, is that your favorite one? So all of a sudden the questions are about that passion, right? What is the plan for next week? So we ask about that area of interest and what they learned. And it's like, oh yeah, I learned how to use the paint bucket tool to make my common writer pink. They're connecting those dots. It's still about my area of passion, but I really did learn a lot in just this one day. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end, we're like, okay, that was amazing. You learned so much. How do you want to celebrate? And again, neurotypicals typically want a round of applause, right? That's common. At the end of a show, we all applaud. Maybe it's a standing ovation, but for many of our kiddos are sound sensitive. So to your point, like applause, is hard. So we could do silent clapping, right? We could do fist bump. So what we do is give the students choices like, hey, you can choose how to celebrate. When it's your turn, you get to celebrate the way you want to. And believe it or not, way back in the day, I did push-ups for a student. And I'm like, okay, now I'm getting too old for that. So it's got to be within reason. But for the most part, it's a question we ask, and then they get to answer it, and then we respect that answer. Because the hardest thing for me is when somebody says, oh, I don't want any celebration, and everybody applauds. I'm like, no, you didn't listen to them. And that's the biggest piece, because for the first time, they're actually being listened to. I didn't want any applause, and you listened to me and you respected that. How often do people make choices for me? This is my choice. And whatever they say, fist bump, high five, thigh claps, it's their choice. We listen and we respect that choice. And what does that feel like to a kid who assumptions are already made all the time? Like, oh, no, what you really want is applause because I want you to have applause. But no. I said I'm good.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. I loved all the respect that was conveyed to all the participants. I love the way that Becca and the other mentors interacted with the kids that they were with. Everything felt so honoring and respectful and not at all diminishing how they were feeling, what they were experiencing. And not everyone could hang in there the whole time. And And the mentors and the other people were really good at taking a lap or taking a break or finding a shift of being to kind of get them back. It was awesome. So you guys are great. You know that. You need to know.
We find seeing students, whether they're coming for the first time or the 20th time or the 100th time, know that this is their safe, happy place. And we just started a batch of workshops this past weekend, and we got a lot of new kiddos, but we got a lot of veterans too. To see this merging of thing, and then sort of the veterans are sort of like, well, here's how we do it here. They're pride because they kind of know the routine, but then to see brand new kids who never stood up in front of 20 people before going, oh, yeah, I learned that. That's really cool. And then how do you want to celebrate? It brings us just as much joy. And that's the little secret. It's like, it is so cool to see students who I've been told will not be successful in an environment go, well, hang around and just watch them grow, watch them thrive, watch them shine.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Chelsea's Vocation. We hope it was valuable to you. If it was, we'd appreciate you sharing it with someone, reviewing it, and or rating it. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are published. We wish you the best as you learn, maybe unlearn, and do better for yourself and those around you. Chelsea encourages you to be gentle with yourself, be gracious with others, and be protective of your own and others' dignity. Until next time, take care.